Everyday injustice. Too many wrongful convictions. Corruption has infected the criminal justice system, leaving too many people helpless, fighting for their lives. Instead of receiving justice, people suffer. Is that why they say justice is blind?
Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Injustice Podcast. I'm your host, David Greenwald. For the past 10 years, we have operated Vanguard Court Watches in California, including San Francisco, Sacramento, and Yolo counties. Our goal? Expose everyday court injustices, and now, more broadly, shine a spotlight on injustices in the entire criminal justice system, in the form of wrongful convictions, police and prosecutorial misconduct, and mass incarceration. This podcast hopes to take it a step further and highlight criminal justice reform on a national level.
Everyday injustice.
Today on Everyday Injustice, we have Joanne Scheer from Felony Murder Elimination Project. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, David. It's such a pleasure to be on today.
So tell us your story. How'd you get here? How did this come about?
This has been a long process. This came about in the midst of an incredible grief and a horrific incident that happened with my son 15 years ago. He was serving as a private first class in the Marine Corps, and he ended up a few months into it. He sold his laptop to an acquaintance of another Marine to get money to drive home. He used to drive home on the weekends from Camp Pendleton. And he sold his laptop and was told that he would be paid, the next day for it. And never heard from the guy again, even though he had reached out to him. He forgot about it a little bit until about a week, 2 weeks later. He was at a fellow Marines apartment with fellow Marines, just watching football and drinking and watching football. And one of the Marines brought up the laptop and said, we should go get it. We should go get the laptop. And one of the Marines that was discussing it he was a two-tour Iraqi war vet. He had been injured in Iraq in a tank explosion, and he was just a normal talking guy. But what had happened is he had lost the right frontal lobe of his brain and a portion of the left, and it left him. The executive function was gone. You wouldn't know it to talk to him in a physical way. He had a scar, but you wouldn't know that there was any trauma. As they went and picked up the laptop computer, he and two of these others, and during the course of arguing with the person who had it, the injured Marine had a moment of PTSD, got upset that the person wasn't following a direct order, pulled a gun and shot and killed this young man. It was not, for my son, they'd been drinking so much, he didn't see it coming. He didn't understand that this young man had been damaged and that something like that could happen. It ended up that all three of them were convicted under the felony murder rule, even though my son did not intend to harm or cause the death. He was still convicted with first-degree murder under the felony murder special circumstance law and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He was sentenced back in 2009, and he'd never been in trouble before. He'd never been in trouble with the law. He'd never even gotten a speeding ticket before. So not knowing how to handle the grief of this, we had never even heard of felony murder. We didn't even know what that was. We even further didn't know how a person could be sentenced to death in prison, which is what life without possibility of parole is, how they could be sentenced to die without having any intent to have harmed anybody or not having killed anybody. So I set about finding out about felony murder, and I looked for organizations in California that had to do with this, and there weren't any. And I looked nationwide to find if there's anybody who could offer me any explanation of this, and there really weren't any. So I went about researching and figuring out what this law is, and I knew I had to. I just couldn't understand why somebody hadn't fixed this law that could so easily do this, right? I just thought, doesn't anybody know about this? So I just started reaching out to the people that I was meeting in prison, in the lines to visit their loved ones, and found out that there are a whole lot of people who are sentenced under felony murder. And we formed an organization and I just started looking into the laws, and my husband and I started meeting with our district senator, who said, well, write a proposal. And I didn't know how to do that. So researched in that, and he didn't know what felony murder was either. So it was a surprise to him. It was a shock to him. So it was a whole learning experience that I just thought I had to try and change this law that so easily reaches out and brings so many people into prison for things that they did not cause, or they did not have any intention to do. So that's how I formed Felony Murder Elimination Project.
For those who aren't familiar with the felony murder rule, one of the amazing things that you learn in this business is that, let's say you and your friend plan a robbery, and you are going to be in the car waiting outside, and the plan is for your friend to go in, rob the place, take some money, and run out. It's not to harm anyone, not definitely not to shoot anyone,
Yeah.
But something goes wrong and the guy ends up shooting and killing someone.
Mhm.
You're on the hook for the same crime that he is, through the felony murder rule.
Yeah.
And we've seen cases where the guy's not even on the site, like there was like a conspiracy to commit a crime, and he's at home and somebody gets killed and he's still on the hook for murder, and these people are put in to prison, incarcerated for sometimes years or decades,
Yeah.
just as though they were the actual killer. So
That's exactly right.
37.
Yeah. And to take that even further, David, if you're out in the car and the clerk pulls a gun and shoots that person inside and kills your friend inside, you will be charged. Even though you weren't inside, you didn't have anything to do with that, you will be charged with felony murder. So yeah.
So then the law has changed now in California.
Yes. Senator Skinner and Restore Justice back in 2018 had Senate Bill 1437, which changed the law for minor participants in a felony murder, for somebody like the person who is in the car or who is down the street as a lookout. It changed the law for them. So that they cannot be charged with murder. They can be charged with the underlying felony, with really what their proportionate to what their participation was in the situation. It was a historic change to felony murder, and really made it more proportionate for those people. What happened with SB 1437, however, it did not change for those participants who were charged with a special circumstance, which is a sentencing law. And it even for those who had that level of participation, if they were charged with special circumstance, that ups that 25-year to life sentence to life without the possibility of parole or death. And if that had been done in SB 1437, it would have made that bill a 2/3 vote bill, which we all know is extremely difficult to get through legislature.
Right.
Yeah. And so
I am completely drawing a blank on the Senator Cortese, SB 300. He introduced a bill. Now, would that impact your son's case, SB 300?
yeah, SB 300, we came up with that proposal back in 2020. No, 2021. It was introduced in 2021. And what that bill did is it did two things. The first thing it did was that it would have given judges back the discretion to strike a special circumstance in any case, and for that in any special circumstance case that they deemed that a parole eligible sentence of 25 years to life would have better served the interest of justice. Right now, judges don't have that discretion. That was taken away by Proposition 115 in 1990. And so that bill would have given the judges back just the discretion in their own courtrooms. The second thing that it did or proposed to do was to change the felony murder special circumstance law 190.2 D for felony murder accomplices who were charged as a major participant. That just means that you were there, and who acted with reckless indifference to human life. And that's what most accomplices are charged with, unless they had complete intent to commit the murder. And so that was trying to eliminate that from the special circumstance law. And we did great. We got it through Senate in 2021. We got it through the Assembly Public Safety and Appropriations in this year. But unfortunately, we did not have enough votes on the Assembly floor to finish the bill. So Senator Cortese pulled it and held it, and our intention is to hopefully in the future bring it back. So it was a very, very narrow bill, but it was a big lift. It was a 2/3 bill, so we needed 2/3 vote.
Those are always hard, even in California.
Right, it's extremely hard. It was a huge lift, and we had wonderful support. We had over 170 organizations supporting it throughout California. Over 300 faith organizations supported it, but we just couldn't get the votes on the Assembly floor, unfortunately.
So what is the role of your organization in all of this?
So when I started the organization in 2010, the goal is to eliminate felony murder from California law. I know people look at me like I'm crazy, but it's a law that we don't need. We've got so many murder and homicide laws in California that we really don't need felony murder in order to charge people with their participation in a crime. You've got first degree murder, you've got second degree murder, you've got conspiracy murder, you've got there's so many different murders that a DA can use to charge someone. The problem with felony murder is that, and the really interesting thing about felony murder is that if you intentionally go into to commit a murder, and then a robbery is a secondary act to that, right? Then you can't be charged with felony murder. You can only be charged with the murder and the robbery. But if it's the opposite, if you go in to rob somebody and there's a death that occurs, even if it's accidental, only then can you be charged with felony murder, which is astonishing, right? Because you can set out with intent, and not be charged with felony murder. So our goal is to get rid of the felony murder rule. It was eliminated by its country of origin, which was England. It was brought over to the United States from England back when California became a state, and it was eliminated in England in 1957. So look at how far behind we are. So the goal is to eliminate felony murder and also to eliminate extreme and disproportionate sentences, such as life without the possibility of parole and the death penalty. We don't need them, and there are too many people who are serving these extreme sentences who should not be dying in prison.
So, I think a lot of people listen to this and they're like, hey, wait, why are we getting rid of these tools? And I think, from my perspective, I don't have a problem, somebody commits a murder, charging them with murder.
Right.
The problem is when somebody really hasn't done anything other than do something stupid, and commit another crime and has nothing to really do with, killing another human being. The punishment needs to really fit the crime, I think is what I'm trying to say. And in a lot of cases, it just doesn't. And you see these kind of really absurd examples of cases where it's just like, they weren't even there.
Yeah. And that's the problem, is that it is a tool. Let's be really transparent about it. Is a very, very very strong tool that a district attorney can use to force testimony, even many times false testimony. And a lot of times they will, if they don't know who the person was who caused the death, and there's 3 or 4 of you, or even 2 of you, they will choose who they think it was and put pressure on that person and offer them a plea deal to a lesser sentence if they'll give testimony against the others. And so many times what you've got the person who actually did cause it is serving a lesser sentence than their co-defendants who were serving life without possibility of parole. I had a meeting many years ago with a district attorney and asked him the best argument for felony murder is. And he said, well, if we have a group of people and we don't know who actually caused the death, then we at least know that that person we've got them in that group, and they'll all pay the price for it. And I asked him then for the best argument against felony murder, and he said to me, malice for robbery does not equal malice for murder. And that, bottom line, is the truth. And so do you stand up and call that out and say, that's exactly it. So we need to stop doing this. And if you look at the statistics, which there weren't any before a felony murder elimination project came into being, I got upset because so many legislators said, well, how many people are serving felony murder? And there are no statistics. We've got them listed as CDCR has them listed as 187 murders. So we set about looking for data, and found out that we at the time there were over 5,200 people serving life without possibility of parole, and 3,700 of those people serving life without parole were first-time offenders. The number one age for somebody to receive a life without parole sentence is 19. So over 3,200 of them were 25 or younger at the time of the crime. So when you look at those statistics, obviously not all of them are serving under felony murder special circumstance, because there are 22 special circumstances. But our data has shown that about 52% of LWOPs are serving under felony murder. And that the SB 300 was only targeting about 20% of that population, of that felony murder life without parole population, because that's what our data indicated were people who were sentenced, who had no intent, who were major participants. So that's how narrow that bill was. Yeah.
Those are stunning numbers. Because I think, a lot of people think, oh, they got LWOP, it's the worst of the worst, at least they're not going to be executed, next issue. But, what this suggests is that there may be real questions whether or not you agree with LWOP, and I increasingly don't. But even if you do, I would think that you would want, to have it be, equivalent to the crime, and it's just not.
It isn't. And the terrible thing about any crime, of course, is that there is always a victim of a crime, right? And we fully believe in punishment for or discipline for your participation in a crime. So we in no way want to undervalue or disrespect or in any way take away from those people who have been harmed, right? And so it's not about stopping discipline or stopping punishment. It's about being held liable and accountable for your participation and for your intent. And I don't think in any other realm than felony murder is it more clear that a net is spread and it will cover whoever has any idea or any concept of whatever that robbery is or whatever the burglary is. It's just a net that is spread too widely and casts too far. And too many people are serving extreme amounts of time for things that they did not intend or commit. That's bottom line.
So I understand what you want to do.
Yeah.
But how are you planning to go about doing it at this point? You've obviously made a lot of progress over the last 12 years. this is an issue on people's radar, whereas it was on no one's radar in 2010. What are you hoping to do over the next few years?
So I know that you're so aware, legislation takes an incredible amount of time, right? And so you bring bills forward, and you're making incremental steps. So we're working right now. We're still working with Senator Cortese. He's an amazing individual, and not afraid of challenges. But we're currently working on legislation, hoping to address people who have served over 30 years of life without parole sentences. We've got a large amount of people that are serving those, and they've been and that was at a time when judges did have judicial discretion. So we're also working on a jury instruction component for felony murder accomplice liability regarding major participation and reckless indifference. Because when a jury is in a trial, in a felony murder trial, they don't necessarily know it's felony murder, nor do they know what the possible sentencing scenario for that is. That if they're given a special circumstance question and they have to answer yes or no, they don't get many times they don't get what reckless indifference actually means. It's a very vague term, and most jurors don't know what that means. So we're working on a jury instruction component addressing that. Right now, we're working in partnership with Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research. It's a nationwide project where we're choosing 2 other states, and we're collecting and analyzing data on the racialized impact of felony murder in those states, and to illustrate the injustice of felony murder laws through the racial and socio-legal analysis, and through personal narratives of those who have been impacted by felony murder. And our plan is to produce model legislation repealing felony murder, not only for California, but for those 2 other states. And hopefully that will be spread across the nation, because felony murder laws are, there are only 4 states that really don't have felony murder laws.
So what do you guys need? How can people get involved?
We're looking for people who are directly impacted. We're looking for community members, because that's what Felony Murder Elimination Project consists of, is impacted and family members of loved ones serving under felony murder rule and life without parole. We would love for them to get in contact with us. We're doing a survey right now on the results of SB 1437 petitions, whether judges are actually following the law and resentencing those who are eligible. So we're working on a survey right now to put into the people inside. So we would love everybody's input, and we would love that if they could reach out to us and let us know if they would be interested in working with us on that and with their loved ones inside. And we would love the support on the future legislation we're hoping to bring. Well, we've already proposed it, and we are bringing it next year. So.
And where can people find you?
They can find us at www.endfmrnow.org, or they can reach me at felonymurderproject@yahoo.com.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Joanne, for joining us and sharing your amazing work.
David, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on. And I just want to thank you so much for your work over all these years, for the truth and honesty in journalism. And you guys are just amazing, amazing advocates. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Joanne Scheer from the Felony Murder Elimination Project. This has been Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald. Join us again next time for more tales from the injustice system.
Thank you to George Powell and Norman Mousequake Barrett for the use of our opening, Everyday Injustice. You can see more of George's music at www.justiceforgeorgepowell.com. That's justiceforgeorgepowell, all one word, .com.